Breaking news, a call for an investigation into Kellyanne Conway. The Office of Government Ethics saying the White House should look into comments Conway made promoting Ivanka Trump's clothing line. And there's strong reason to believe that she violated ethics rules. Jessica Schneider is out front.
Kellyanne Conway's sales pitch for Ivanka Trump's fashion line.
Go buy Ivanka's stuff is what I would tell you. I hate shopping. I'm going to go get some on myself today.
Now prompting the Office of Government Ethics to call for a White House investigation and possible disciplinary action against Conway. It is the latest blow to Trump's top advisor after what was a manic Monday. Her credibility questioned after a rapid-fire chain of events that started with this effort to shut down speculation about National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's future.
Yes, General Flynn does enjoy the full confidence of the president.
That succinct statement coming at 4:07 p.m. But as the minutes ticked by, reporters were unrelenting. They swarmed Sean Spicer, demanding more information from the press secretary. At 5:11 p.m., just 64 minutes later, a stark shift in tone by way of a statement released by Spicer saying, "The president is evaluating the situation." A simple 6 words seeming to undermine Conway's initial message. Then, just before 11 p.m., the full confidence of the president that Conway insisted upon appeared to have eroded. At 10:45 p.m., sources told CNN that Michael Flynn resigned from his post as National Security Advisor. So why were Conway's characterizations of full support from the president seemingly so off? Sources tell CNN Conway and other top officials aren't communicating. Instead, they're all trying to take each other out, Game of Thrones style. But this morning, Conway pushed back, insisting she wasn't out of the loop and that her statement jived with Sean Spicer's.
Both were true. The president is very loyal. He's a very loyal person, and by night's end, Mike Flynn had decided it was best to resign. He knew he'd become a lightning rod, and he made that decision.
Later this afternoon, tweeting, "I serve at the pleasure of @POTUS. His message is my message. His goals are my goals. Uninformed chatter doesn't matter." Kellyanne's fumbles front and center over the past few weeks.
President Obama had a 6-month ban on the Iraqi refugee program after 2 Iraqis came here to this country, were radicalized, and they were the masterminds behind the Bowling Green massacre. Most people don't know that because it didn't get covered.
Conway conjuring up a made-up massacre before saying she misspoke and drawing ridicule for her twisting of the truth.
Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts? Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
The Office of Government Ethics says the evidence is quite strong that Conway violated the standards of conduct when she made that sales pitch. Now, OG is requesting that the White House report back to them by February 28th, laying out the results of their investigation into Conway and any resulting disciplinary action. But, Aaron, tonight, no response from the White House as to whether an investigation is even underway. Aaron?
All right, Jessica, thank you very much. And out front now, the former communications director for Ted Cruz's campaign, Alice Stewart. She's known Kellyanne Conway for more than a decade, the former White House communications director for President Obama, Jen Psaki, and the former mayor of Philadelphia, Michael Nutter, who is a Democrat. Mayor Nutter, let me start with you. How big of a problem is Kellyanne Conway right now to this White House?
Well, Aaron, she's a big problem for the president and the office of the president. And let me first say, Kellyanne Conway certainly served candidate Donald Trump very, very well. She's obviously a very strong woman, and I recognize strong women. I've got a wife and a daughter. They're pretty strong women as well. But campaigns are different than governing. You know, as some say, the streets weren't made for everybody. That's why they made sidewalks. Kellyanne needs to get on the sidewalk. I think she has damaged her own credibility, but even worse, she's hurting the credibility of President Trump and causing massive problems within his own administration. And so, as she said, she serves at the pleasure of the president. She should do the president a favor and resign herself.
Alice?
I think he's way off on that. She is someone that is extremely loyal to the president, and he is reciprocating. Look, when it comes to her service to the president, as she says, she serves at the pleasure of the president, and she has done a tremendous job. And look, with regard to whether or not he has confidence in her, look, she worked till midnight last night, and he called her this morning first thing and asked her to go on the morning shows and represent her. And he, right after that, she was in a closed-door meeting with education officials, and he talked about how he has full faith and confidence in Kellyanne. And she is certainly not in any understanding that her job is in jeopardy, as it should not be, because she has been doing a good job for the president and will continue to do so. And she's not going to get deterred by comments that are made about her on Twitter, and a 140-character takedown of her character. She is in good shape and will continue to be so. She is there for the long haul, without a doubt.
So Jen, here's the thing, though. You know, Alice talks about loyalty. And look, loyalty is important. A president needs people who are loyal. You know that. It is perhaps paramount, but it is not to the point of being blind. We're talking about a person who went out and talked about a massacre multiple times. That wasn't the only time. Multiple times it didn't happen. She said she misspoke. She talked about it at least 3 times. She was completely wrong about General Flynn and misled the American people yesterday. She talked about alternate facts. You've worked as a communications director in the White House. Would you keep, at the least, putting Kellyanne Conway out for interviews? I mean, if the president is the one who picked up the phone and called her and said, go get on TV, he then picked her to do that this morning.
Well, look, I think credibility is more important than loyalty, and your job as an advisor to any president is to tell them when the strategy is off, tell them when something isn't going well, even if it involves you. I don't know if that's happening inside the White House. It doesn't seem like it is. But this is much larger than one individual advisor. The problem here is that there's a president who's not driving a strategy. It's not clear what their priorities are. They're not selling anything. So therefore, there's a big focus on staff stories and who's up and who's down, and that's a huge problem for any White House, because that creates the Game of Thrones environment that you were talking about earlier in your program.
And Jen, on that front, right, this is what sources are telling us. The top officials at the White House, so you talk about, you know, the ones we always hear about, right? We hear about Sean Spicer and Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway. They're not even speaking to each other because they're too busy trying to take each other down. That's where the Game of Thrones reference comes. Yep. So you've been in a White House. A lot of this jockeying, I would imagine, on some level is normal because everybody wants to be the person that's the trusted advisor of the president. What we're seeing now, did you ever experience it?
This is not normal. This is malicious to me. I would say when I was in the White House and when we were starting off in the early days, the financial crisis was happening, no one was getting sleep, we were off the campaign, but we were a family. And the fact is, I could punch my brother or hit my brother or make fun of my brother who worked next to me, but nobody else could. And I think the problem, one of the problems you're seeing here is that a lot of the senior team didn't come up in the campaign together. They didn't develop those family relationships, and it seems like there's a lot of out for oneself happening here, and that's a really unhealthy environment in any White House.
Alice, do you feel like that this is something that Kellyanne is suffering from, that the knives are out, the Game of Thrones analogy?
What we're seeing here is clearly this administration has been doing quite a bit since he was sworn in, and they've been doing a lot with regard to executive orders and following through on campaign promises. And as Jessica mentioned in her piece, things have been going at rapid fire, and that's exactly what happened yesterday. And there's been a lot of confusion as to, she mentioned the timeline of events yesterday, and Kellyanne coming out at 4 o'clock saying that Flynn had the full confidence of the president, which he did, based on the fact that he was instrumental in the foreign policy meetings and conversations and dialogue that the president had been having.
That's completely contradictory to what they're saying today, which was that it was a gradual eroding of trust over the past 13 days, Alice.
But the point is that was, at that time, he had the full faith and confidence of the president, but it was such a fluid day, and everything was changing by minute. I was here at CNN. Everything was changing minute by minute, and after she said that was when clearly they were looking at it more closely, and shortly after that was when Flynn decided it was just too much of a distraction, and it was time for him to step down. I have to say,
if that is actually the case, that is terrifying. On so many levels, that's terrifying. But go ahead, Mary Nutter.
Well, what happened between 4 and 5? More analysis of the Washington Post story? I mean, this is a whole lot of hogwash here. This is not an eroding situation. The president should have brought Mike Flynn in about 15 minutes after the Justice Department came to see him on January 26, sat him down, looked him in the eye, and said, did you misinform Vice President Pence, yes or no? And at that point, when hopefully the general would say, yes, I misinformed him, because Mr. Flynn, General Flynn, also serves at the pleasure of the president, Mr. Trump should have said, I'm relieving you of your duty, that's unacceptable, end of conversation. But you know, and the timeline has been up on the screen, this went on for days and days and days. What due process are we talking about? This is a whole lot of nonsense here, and Flynn would probably still be serving in this position, but for the press and the Washington Post story, which caused that erosion. This is a lot of nonsense here. You know, we talk about Abraham Lincoln and the team of rivals. This is Mr. Trump and a group of enemies. They are at each other's throats. It is a mess down there in that White House, and probably more to come.
All right, thank you all very much.